Hi, my name is Adolfo Sanchez-Blanco and I'm one of the professors of biology at Capital Community College. In this series of videos, we are talking about various scientific insights into COVID-19. In this video in particular, we're gonna try to get answers to this big question, which is, what is it going to happen next with COVID-19? Alright, so the very first thing that we need to understand is where are we in the process of this pandemic. Right, so let's just focus on our state. Let's focus on the state of Connecticut. As we have talked about in previous videos, the process of the pandemic goes through this curve of infections where at the worst moment of the pandemic in our state, we had a significant number of new daily infections, right? And thanks to the contention measures, we were able to bring down the number of new daily infections down, right? So right now we are somewhere in this lower third bottom part of the curve. So we have made a significant progress into bringing the new number of infections down on a daily basis in our state. However, the virus is still around. The virus is not gone, okay? So we need to understand what is going to happen next based on the fact that the virus is still around us. All right, so to understand what it could happen next, it's very important to understand what happens when somebody goes through the process of infection. So let's imagine a situation in which somebody gets infected. As I have explained already in previous videos, when somebody gets infected, this person is gonna enter into a stage of incubation of the virus, which is a delicate moment because this person is infectious without being aware that he is infectious yet. So we normally refer to these people as pre-symptomatic people. And then eventually, this person will go to develop the symptoms of the disease, right? So this person will become sick of COVID-19. He will go through the process of sickness, and in about 10 days or so, if everything goes right, this person will successfully clear the virus and will become officially recovered. Right? So in this process of recovery, what is happening is that the body of this individual is fighting back. The immune system of this individual is reacting against the virus and is doing a series of things involving the developing of antibodies that are going to target specifically this new type of virus and eventually take this new virus down. All right, so it is believed, or it is assumed, that when somebody recovers from infection, it would develop immunity against this virus. So in other words, in principle, this person wouldn't be able to catch another infection of this same virus again. But again, let's take this with a grain of salt, all right? As we have described before, not everybody goes through the process of getting symptoms of the disease. Not everybody gets sick in an obvious way, all right? So we have described the fact that many people that get infected, could be up to 50% of the overall population that gets infected, will incubate the virus, but they will never be aware that they have been infected by the virus. All right, so we refer to these people as asymptomatic people because they don't develop any symptoms of the disease ever. However, we have to be very careful with these people because, as I have explained before, these people can also shed the virus and therefore they can also be infectious against other people. Now, at some point, these asymptomatic people will also get their immune system to fight against the virus and to make the virus go away. All right, so they will be also at some point recover from the virus infection, and they would, in principle, also acquire immunity against this virus. But as I said before, we have to take this with a big grain of salt, because there are a lot of very important open questions about this process of acquiring, developing immunity that could last for a while against a potential situation of reinfection. Like, for example, do people with mild COVID-19 cases, including people that are asymptomatic, develop good enough immunity as to protect them against a possible case of reinfection? We don't know with 100% certainty. There are some very recent studies that indicate that this is a real possibility, that most likely even asymptomatic people will develop enough antibodies to fight against a potential case of reinfection, but it is just a maybe. All right, so we have to be very careful about making any assumptions. All right, the other thing that we don't have a clue, the other thing that we don't know for certain is, even if immunity was to happen, for how long is this going to happen? Like, if we get immunity, is that immunity gonna last for 4-5 years? Is that immunity gonna last for 6 months? We don't know. The answer to this question is still totally unknown, and only time will tell. All right, and the two possibilities are open. Okay, so, but for the description of what we're gonna talk about, we're gonna assume an optimistic case scenario, which is likely but not 100% known. We're gonna assume that people that get exposed to the virus and that they go through the process that I describe here, either as symptomatic or as asymptomatic people, but when they recover from the infection, let's assume, with all these caveats, let's assume that they develop immunity. All right? Now, when nobody has immunity, all right, when nobody has been exposed to the virus, which is what happened at the beginning of this pandemic, and this is why one of the reasons why it spread so fast, when nobody has immunity, anybody is a potential target for the virus. So if you get exposed to the virus will infect you, and then you will become sick, or you will be an asymptomatic, but you will be infected with the virus, and therefore you can also be infectious. And then this process can continue. If nobody has immunity, everybody is a potential target for infection against this virus. All right. Now, the situation here becomes different when people in the community have been eventually exposed to the virus and they have recovered from that infection. We can assume for the time being that they develop immunity. All right, and the more of these people that they are in the community, the more of these exposed and recovered people that have developed immunity against the virus, the more difficult for the viral infection of COVID-19 to spread in the population. Why? Very simple. Look at the graph. If you have a situation in which one of these two people has already been infected beforehand and has already recovered and has already developed immunity, then the virus cannot infect this person, right? Because this person has already immunity, built-in immunity against the virus, so it can repel the attack of the virus. All right, so this person now cannot be a vector of spread of the disease, whereas this other person that is still susceptible to the infection can be, and it will be, a vector of a spread of the disease. Right? So this person can still spread the disease, whereas this one cannot get infected and therefore cannot get other people infected. And then if you have a significant number of these people that have already been exposed and recovered from the disease, you can see that this has a major effect in slowing down the rate of spread of the disease, reaching to a point that if you have enough of these people in your community, then the disease cannot spread at all. That point is what is called the herd immunity point. All right, so for this particular virus, taking into account the transmission rate of this virus, it is calculated that this herd immunity point for the virus that produces COVID-19 is about 60 to 70% of the population. In other words, if you have in your community a population of about 60 to 70% of the people that have already been exposed to the virus and have already developed immunity against the virus, that means that you have made it difficult enough for the virus to become almost impossible for the remaining 40 or 30% of the population that hasn't been exposed yet to become exposed against the virus. This is the idea of herd immunity. All right. Now, are we there? No, we are not at the level of herd immunity in Connecticut or in any other part of the country, or actually any other part of the world doesn't have herd immunity at all yet. Like if we focus on the state of Connecticut right now, in Connecticut, right now being by the end of May, beginning of June, there are about 13% of the total population of the state that has already been exposed to the virus, according to the best estimates. All right, so you can see that 13% is very far away from this 60 to 70% that is required for herd immunity. All right, and what it also means is that if we're here at the level of this point of the curve of infections, of daily infections, and there are only 13% of the total population of Connecticut that have been exposed to the virus, that means that the remaining 87% of the population are still susceptible to become infected by the virus. The virus is still around us, and 87% of the population approximately can still be infected. All right, so this unavoidably means that new outbreaks are possible. Not only possible, but likely if we lower our guard and let the virus continue with its normal course of infections. All right, so what we have to do until we reach herd immunity, because herd immunity is very far away, we must keep the number of daily infections, the number of new infections, as low as possible. The virus is not going to go anywhere. The virus is still around us. But what we can do is to have strong enough prevention measures to get infected so that we don't get greater numbers of new daily infections, because an outbreak would be more than likely. All right, and we unfortunately need to do this until a vaccine comes around. And a vaccine, what would do is to immunize people against the virus so that you eventually reach to that point of herd immunity in your society, in your community, without having to let people to catch the virus on their own. All right, so in summary, we tackle the question of what is going to happen next with COVID-19, and we have talked about how it appears preliminary evidence shows that people that recover from COVID-19 seem to develop immunity against a potential case of reinfection against the virus, but there are still big open questions that haven't been fully answered. Like, does really everybody get that good enough level of immunity to protect them against reinfection? For how long are they going to get this type of immunity, etc., etc.? All these answers to these questions are not clear yet, so we have to be very careful. Now, the other thing that we know for certain is that as it is right now, as for now, the majority of the population is still it hasn't been exposed to the virus, which means they can still be infected. All right, and because the majority of the population, both in our state as in our country, haven't been exposed against the virus, that means that potential outbreaks are still possible, and we have to be very careful in preventing those.